Right.
All right.
Well, I am here with Pastor Scott McAnally, who is the pastor of the Lutheran Church of Hope in Colorado. Remind me of the town?
Broomfield, Northwest Denver suburb.
Northwest Denver. Awesome. And I have a friend who's in Broomfield.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's where we are actually. So,
Okay. Okay.
yep,
Yeah. Cool. I'll have to tell him to check you out.
absolutely. We'd love to have them.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk with Pastor Scott because my colleague Terry Stagner Collier several years ago did a study on growing Lutheran churches, and she identified yours as one of those. And so I wanted to just talk to you about your thinking about evangelism and what it means for your church to reach out to your community and to the world, and how you guys are going about that. Do you want to
Sure.
tell us a little bit about yourself and your congregation?
Sure. Well, the congregation, Lutheran Church of Hope, we're celebrating 60 years this year of ministry in Broomfield. We have evolved as Broomfield has evolved from a bedroom community to the suburban metro complex, and the challenges of that and the blessings of that. So I would say in this part of the country, where your typical ELCA medium middle-sized congregation, we roughly 700 on the rolls. We worship, we worship just under 200 in person and another 30 households online on average a month. Because we're all busy, our metrics for worship attendance and measuring that is, as you all know, where you are, life is extremely busy. And but I'm grateful for folks that stop in, a few times a month to nurture their faith and to recenter their lives on the grace and love of God and the hope that comes from it. I've been here for 15 years and loving it. I'm actually a native Southern Californian, but I did my undergrad in Colorado, so that's been my home since my undergraduate years at Colorado State. First call was out in DC, on the Virginia side of DC, and got to come back here. So ecstatic and loving ministry, and 15 years, and we're still dancing together. So we're grateful for what the Holy Spirit's doing.
That's great. That's great. Do you guys have any kind of a strategy or plan for outreach and evangelism? Is that something that's more organic or?
Sure, I think that's a both and question.
Okay.
Organic, absolutely. First of all, one of the things we really try to emphasize here in our daily walk with Jesus and our relationship with Jesus is how are we living the grace of God in our lives? Because I tend to believe that that's where we will see curiosity leading into deeper questioning, leading into conversion, if you will, for lack of a better word. We could put all the ads in the papers and put all the social media blastings out, but I think the real nitty gritty, and I think it's pretty biblical, the real nitty gritty of bringing people to the faith, to introducing people to Jesus, is how we live our individual lives and how our relationships with Jesus is reflected in everything we do. And that's both blessing and scary all at the same time. Growing up in Southern California, I use this example all the time with my community is, I learned to drive in Southern California. And so my everyday evangelism doesn't usually come out in my driving, but that's one thing I have to remember is when somebody cuts me off is not to be tempted to give them a gesture or something, but to remind myself that they are a unique person called by God. And for some reason, they're in more of a hurry than I am. But that's just one of the simple ways, the challenges that I have to live my faith is, okay, how do I, like something every day as driving, how do I reflect Jesus in my life and what I do?
Yeah.
Um, Longer term planning wise, absolutely. I mean, I think the plan for every faith community should be evangelism, growth, both inside and outside, and engagement to the community should be a major part. I mean, that's why God has called us to be together to impact and change the world with God's grace. So, how are we doing that intentionally as a larger community? Not just through our partnerships with different social organizations in town with our food banks and clothing and social service organizations, but utilizing resources that the congregation has.
Yeah, that's great. So what do you think in your community is or are some of the resources and some of the gifts that
Sure.
you have?
So I'd like to share a little bit about Anchor House, which is a
Mhm.
major outreach of our community. Um, Gosh, about 8 years ago, the Broomfield clergy, we get together probably once every other month, and we kept having this conversation about affordable housing. I'm not sure in Athens, Georgia, if affordable housing is a major issue. It seems to be
Huge
an
issue.
issue everywhere.
Yeah.
And within affordable housing, you have, transitional housing and emergency housing and permanent affordable housing. And I just went to clergy meeting after clergy meeting. I'm like, gosh, it's nice to sit around and have a cup of coffee and a Danish and talk about it, but we got to do something. So I brought it back to our council here, and we put a task force together. We have like several churches, faith communities, not just churches, but faith communities in Denver. We have land. We actually had just over 4 acres of undeveloped land. In fact, in the Denver metro area, faith communities today have over 8,000 acres of undeveloped land that
Wow.
sitting next to the church building or sitting next to the parking lot or so forth. And so we started a conversation. Well, what if we used a portion of that land for some type of housing? And we studied the pros and cons of emergency housing, transitional and affordable housing. We met with some of our social service organization partners, our food bank, our clothing bank, those who provide Habitat for Humanity, to name a few. And it wasn't until we sat down with our Lutheran partners at Lutheran Family Services, Rocky Mountains here, that they brought up this idea of, one of the challenges we face as a major foster provider in the state of Colorado is when young adults age out of the foster system.
Mhm.
Um, and typically they are put out onto the street with a trash bag of their belongings. As we dug a little bit deeper, we found out that over 50% of aged out foster youth will have a homeless experience, and that's more than 3 nights without a place to go by the time they're 25. And so what Lutheran Family Services said is that, we have lots of Section 8 housing around Denver that we could put them in, but that they're doomed to failure almost because it's not a community. They don't have peers that have had the same experience. So we began thinking and dreaming about what if we had some type of a housing for a cohort, if you will, of
Yeah.
aged out foster young adults. And this was in 2018. Our mind started spinning. We quickly partnered with an architect and started designing an apartment building that would
Wow.
go on about a half acre of our land. Um, and then Thrivent Financial heard about it and gave
Yeah.
us two $50,000 challenge grants. And
Wow.
before we knew it, we had over $200,000 raised. Habitat for Humanity got on board. Let's build this in a habitat model. So let's use the
Wow.
community to build it. City and County of Broomfield, they're desperately looking for any type of affordable housing. So they got on board with giving us tax incentives and building incentives, permit fees waivers, sewer tap fees waivers, and so forth.
Yeah.
And we were all ready to break ground, and then March of 2020.
Oh man.
I think you all are familiar with
Yeah.
that happened with us, and around the world. Um, and just after Easter that year, we got back together as we did on Zoom, and we figured out that, what, we are still going to break ground.
Mhm.
And we all sat out there with our masks and 6 feet apart from each other, and we broke ground and we built Anchor House through 2020 and 2021. And in August of 2022, we dedicated it. And today we have 8 studio apartments, about 400 square feet. They all have a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a small living area with some type of sleeping arrangement, whether it's a bed or a recliner, a small table, TV. And it's independent living, so it's 8 apartments. There is a caseworker there on site, 40 plus hours a week. And it is, we use referrals from different organizations, and 8 emancipated foster youth that have aged out of the foster system are learning how to live independently.
Yeah.
To be a part of the program, they got to be either in school or working or a combination of both. We have monthly classes with partner organizations like 4-H or Kiwanis or Elks that come in and like practical things like how to run a budget or create a budget and how to own a checking account and have a checking account. We have a couple professional chefs in the congregation that meet with them, with residents every couple of months, like how to put a grocery list together, how to go grocery shopping, how to cook.
Mhm.
So that's kind of been our diamond in the rough, if you will, of using
Yeah.
some of our resources, land,
Mhm.
that our foremothers and forefathers years ago, um, when land was cheap, said we need land for the church, and hopefully
Mhm.
for some type of church ministry. It's reimagining church ministry,
Yeah.
uh, but it is church ministry no less.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. That's really exciting. And, that brings you together in partnership with a lot of different organizations, creates
Yeah.
goodwill.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure you've heard of the sociologist Rodney Stark,
Yep.
with this book, The Rise of Christianity. And his whole thing is basically, why did the church grow? Because they took care of the poor, because they
Yep.
cared for the widows, because they took care of abandoned children.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
kind of a no-brainer when you think about it, but when you consider the way the world was before the rise of the church, um, you know, it makes sense.
Yep, a lot of Matthew 25. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really cool. So
Mhm.
what kind of a formal connection do the people of your church have with that ministry?
Sure, sure. So it's right across the parking lot. So we Christmas time or holiday time, because we have an Orthodox Jewish person living there. So Hanukkah or Christmas time, we always give presents. First of all, most of these young adults have never had a present in their life.
Wow.
And and we're not ashamed to talk about the Christian tradition is that we give.
Hmm.
And so, like this year, we asked all the residents to pick a pair of shoes because everybody wants a pair of shoes.
Hmm.
Uh, and we got everything from knee-high boots to Vans to oh, I'm blanking on the shoes that my kids wear, but they're like a topsider shoe,
Hmm.
and they're not Sperry's, but they're GoDaddies or something like that. Anyways, um, and they woke up Christmas morning, and every one of them had a package underneath the tree and the Hanukkah sign, even though we were a week late on Hanukkah. They all got to unwrap a present from the congregation.
Hmm.
We do monthly dinners. We host monthly dinners, so they're welcome to come.
Hmm.
One resident has joined the congregation.
Hmm.
But it's more about for us, it's more about the way we show generosity and grace
Right.
versus let's get them in the church on a Sunday morning.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think about my own young adulthood, and maybe you had something like this. I didn't darken the door of the church very much for
Yeah.
several years, but I
Hmm.
can remember, a few pretty formative experiences that I had going to church, and just the sort of grace that I was shown, made it very not difficult for me to come back,
Yep.
later in
Mhm.
life. So you never know what seeds you're planting.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. Well, I am so grateful for your time and your willingness to share about your congregation. And is there any hope or prayer that you have for us in Athens, Georgia?
Well, continued discernment, um, continued going at it, being everyday disciples, being everyday followers of Jesus in your life. I think that's if there's a great book, Atomic Habits, and it talks about just one small thing.
Hmm.
What can you do? One small thing you can do today in your relationship with Jesus, and that will be reflected in your life. And the parable of the seeds. We throw seeds on all kinds of different grounds, and I think as we work on our relationship with Jesus, seeds get thrown, and people recognize it. And Yeah, there's going to be days where we feel like we're on the path or we feel like we're on rocks or in thorns, but that day when we hit that fertile soil and we have that deep conversation with someone, that day when we know someone that we've met comes in and experiences the grace and love of God for the first time, boy, that fertile soil makes it all worthwhile. So continue throwing seeds, continue to till the soil, continue to walk in the shadow of the cross, because we all know that on the other side of the cross, that empty tomb awaits for all of us.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Well said.
So
Well,
blessings to you all.
thank you, and blessings to you too. We'll be praying for you and for your church, and wish you a blessed Easter.
Absolutely. You all as well. And for those going through catechumenate and looking towards to Easter Vigil, blessings to you. That is a holy and sacred night. So we'll keep that in our prayers as well.
Thank you. I'm grateful for that.
So.